I'll read you something. Let me start by reading you the end of a letter before I read the beginning, before I tell you a couple of stories. The end of the letter says, remind everyone if you see fit. This is a letter to me that I got in 2008. Remember to remind your people, if you see fit, that God can challenge us in ways that we could never imagine. Really appreciate what you have today because you might not have it tomorrow. But when life does challenge you to your core, stop, as you taught me, listen, and God will let you know its will and how you're going to benefit from God's works. My life has changed in ways I never imagined, and for the better, believe it or not. Now, this sounds like a letter that, anybody, and I get letters all the time saying, thank you for this truthful message. It's really helped me. And it's a message that we share here. That's what you're here for. You're not here for the jokes, although they're not bad sometimes, right? What you're here for is some truth without dogma, without bells and whistles, without bullshit that tells you what you have to do to become the person, to be loved the way you want to be loved. All that's gone, stripped down, and what you're left with is a set of laws and a set of truths that's going to help you live a life that is strong and empowered, living in the light, living in your strength, discovering that you are far greater than you ever imagined you were, that there's so much more inside of you than you ever believed could be, and you don't need anybody to get you there. You can go there directly yourself. All middlemen are not necessary unless they point you in the direction of your own damn self. That's always the direction you want to be pointed in, is back to the place of you. Because inside of you, whatever it is you're looking for, there you will find it. This sounds like a letter of somebody saying, hey, really cool, thanks. I left town, but I took your teachings with me, and thanks so much. I had some hard times. It sounds like maybe he could have, something happened. Maybe he could have lost a job, or the apartment he was going for didn't come through, or he lost out on a bid in eBay and he really wanted that Mont Blanc pen, something like that. But the teachings, he said, that we learned, worked. And so, you know what? Things are better for it. That's what the letter at the end sounds like. I wanted to write you a quick email. This is the beginning of the letter, and say hello. You may not remember me, so I included a picture. I regularly attended services at Sacred Center while living in New York City, but I've since moved to Minneapolis. And in 2003, unfortunately, I suffered a brain injury secondary to a 4-day coma. It is amazing how quickly and profoundly your life can change when God has that in its plan. I really thought I was going to be able to adjust to this new way of life and thinking. I went from being a pilot to not being able to ride a bike in the blink of one eye. I was told I would never work again and not be able to carry on any type of understandable conversation with anyone, and basically be left to sit around disabled. That's a bad week, right? That's a bad week. See, in this series of turning points that we've been doing, we're on week 5. We've been talking about the moments in time when something happens, and not when it just happens to you, when something happens to us as human beings, and it's universal. What happens in those moments, how we're to hold them, what to do with them so they don't crush us like a grape. See, it doesn't matter if wine comes out of the grape. If the grape is us and we are crushed, there is a chance we will not get back up again. There is such a chance we will not recover from them. And they are called turning points because we're meant to turn to something greater that awaits us. Because what life is doing in these turning points, and you can't see it with our eyes, because with our eyes, this looks like a crappy deal. He was a nice guy. I remember him very well. Very tall and thin and good looking and sweetheart. Sweetheart. These things aren't supposed to happen to good people. We know that. That's the rule. Especially if you're a church-going person. That's the rule. What's up with that? Have that happen to my ex who's a bitch. Then you understand. But not to somebody who's like a really nice person. The turning points in our life go back to the 12-week series on a way of life that works, so we'll understand when the Tao teaches us. And it says so specifically, you have got to know what the will of life is. You've got to know it. You have got to know that life is a movement. All of life is a movement toward your wholeness. Even if it looks like you're broken. What do they say about the tadpole? Until its tail falls off, it can only be in the water. When its tail falls off, it can be in land and water. We think, well, it's a tadpole. But yeah, what if it's our tail? Right? When it's our tail, we're not so willing to have something fall off. We want everything we came with. I don't want anything to be taken away. And yet, oftentimes in these turning points, it seems as if something we're holding on to in our life. We talked about money. We talked about health. We're talking about what happens when something happens, man, and the lights go out. That moment that we reach more than once, that turning point we reach more than once, when the lights go out, not just because of what happened, but our reaction to what has happened, and we absolutely lose our connection to our faith. It's the moment when we turn away from spirit or source or God or whatever it is you call it in your home and universe, and we say, you know what? You have totally forsaken me. You said you were not going to forsake me. You said you'd be with me till the end of all the worlds, quote unquote. You said it in the Bible. It must be true. And yet, this happened. And what we do in that moment is turn out the lights, put down the shades, and walk into a dark room or on a dark path, man. And that piece of what we do is so much worse than what happens to us. See, the dark night of the soul is not something reserved for saintly people. The dark night of the soul comes to us in moments that are our turning points, meant to bring us to our wholeness, to bring out of us the greatness that has been lying dormant, that, you know what, thank you very much, not interested. Why? Because we live, as the teachings, the Eastern teachings tell us, sometimes in this wonderful cocoon of complacency. We like our apartment, we like the person we're with, they're not the best, but they're not so bad. The apartment's a little small, not so bad. The job's not so great, but it's not so bad. We like our body, not so great, but not so bad. We like our health, not so great, but not so bad. We've come to a place of complacency where we say, I'll coast here. But in life, there's no such thing as coasting. There's no such thing. Coasting as a word doesn't exist. In life, things are either busy growing or they're busy dying. There's no such thing as coasting. I'll stop, thank you. I'll take a pass on the flow of life flowing through me, but thank you for offering. There's no such thing as stopping the flow, because when we stop the flow of life from doing what it is geared to do, which is to move us like it moves the flowers, like it moves the bees, like it moves the bushes, like it moves the trees, like it moves all of nature into the whole fullest expression of itself, we suffer right there and disconnect ourselves from the source of life, and we feel betrayed. Right? Here you have in a different story all of the disciples, right? All of the disciples that Jesus was their teacher, man. They lived with him, they walked with him, they talked with him. It wasn't like you come once a week and we go our separate ways and it's like, oh, good to see you. I mean, they were together all the time in each other's faces, right? You probably like me very much because you only see me once a week, right? My girlfriend might have a whole different feeling because she sees me all the time, year after year. I'm always there. So you're going to have a different feeling that way, right? They saw him all the time. They came completely to depend on this teacher for everything. He was their faith. He was their belief system because he believed, he did miracles. I haven't even done one good miracle. He did great miracles. And I don't mean little miracles like, oh, the chair's like an inch off the ground, or, oh, look, the spoon is bending. That doesn't do you any worldly good at all. But let me feed 5,000 people with 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread. Man, I am on Oprah so fast. It's not even funny, right? He did that miracle, so they saw what this guy could do, and they were hanging with him. They got their strength from him. God, they got their courage from him. They were in the presence of the light itself. And what happens? Oh, man. What happens is something so crazy, it's almost as crazy, if not crazier, than what happened to this guy. In the blink of an eye, he goes into a 4-day coma. In the blink of an eye, his life as a pilot, pilots, even just the thought of a pilot is a hot thought. Wearing the uniform and they drive the plane. You don't have to be straight to get into the fact that this is a cool guy you'd be wanting to date. He's a pilot. Right? Different than a word processor. Nothing wrong with the word processor, but you imagine a pilot. Word processors don't get to wear uniforms and outfits and things and walk, with their bag. And everybody looks at them, I do, and they're all handsome, every one of them. Something absurd happens. A turning point comes to call our attention to a time where we need to take something inside of us out of hiding. And what's in hiding is the greatness of who we are and what we've come to be. That is the bottom line of a turning point. And when we turn to the source and we say, you have failed me, you have let me down, we turn the very light off that we need. God is the light in which we see. You don't like the word God in your head, just replace it with a Rolodex and look for another word that you like. Google God and find 9,000 different ways to call it and call it something else. For tonight we'll call it that because he's calling it God. So Jesus, a teacher who came and shook stuff up, man, really shook things up by saying, don't worry about the law, worry about the spirit of the law. You don't say, not in a religious orthodox community of people, don't worry about the law. The Sabbath wasn't made for man. Man was made for the Sabbath. We should do things on the Sabbath. If the Sabbath gets in our way, what does this mean? Jewish tradition was all about law, and he was saying, worry less about law, worry more about love. That's where you want to put your money. This was so radical, I cannot tell you how this shook people up. And he ended up, as we all know, because we know the story and saw the movie, right? He ended up in the most despicable way, in the most horrible way, in the most painful way, being killed. There wasn't a more disgraceful way of being killed than being crucified. That's where they put like the petty thieves and criminals. And they put him up on a cross, and it took 6 hours, according to legend, from 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon for him to finally die. What an agonizing death. Now here are all the people who've been with him, right? Jesus went around preaching about love. He's dead, and this is what happens to him. How far away from their thinking system is it? He's asking us to go out and preach the good news. Hello. We just saw what happened to you, so I'm not sure we want to go out and follow you in preaching the good news, because the good news wasn't that good for you. So here they are assembled after his death, doing what we do, exactly what we do. And why do I tell this story? Because we think those stories are different than our stories, and they aren't. We think our situation is different than everybody else's. It isn't. It isn't different than anybody's in this room, and it isn't different than anybody's 2,000 years ago in an old book written about people who are going through the same turning points, which is why we read those stories and we say, what is it in that story I need to know about in my story, right? So they're sitting around, and they are fearful, and they are crying, and they are upset, and they are anxious, and they're scared to death. They don't know if they're even going to hang together as a team anymore. They don't know what's going to happen because their leader is gone, and in a horrible way. So something odd happens, and this comes from the Gnostic Gospel of Mary. This doesn't come from the Gospels, because in the Gospel, you're not going to see, in the traditional Gospels, you are not going to see a Gospel written by a woman. There are only 4, and not one of them is written by a woman. This Gospel was discovered, along with all the other Gospels, that at the time the church put itself together and organized itself. It made a decision about which Gospels would be the ones that were chosen. They chose 4. We're all familiar with them. And every other Gospel, every other Gnostic Gospel written at that time was thrown away, burned, or considered heretical. Which is why a number of people, whoever they are, decided to do something very smart. They took them and buried them, so they would not be burned and lost for all time. Very smart. All these years later, thousands of years later, the earth burps them up, right? Okay? And up they come. And what do these Gospels say? These Gospels talk about not needing a middleman. These Gospels talk about having a direct experience yourself. These Gospels talk about spiritual enlightenment that you yourself can have by turning within yourself. You don't need an organization to do it. You can go there all by yourself. These Gospels are heretical because you don't need an organization to ratify and verify your validity and your goodness. You can go there all by yourself. Heretical. And this is where that story comes from, the Gnostic Gospel of Mary. History has told us that Mary was a whore. That is an absolutely outrageous piece of fiction, because according to this Gnostic Gospel, she was one of the disciples that was written out of the script because women were not welcome. Sorry. Only now do we understand that she herself wrote a gospel. She who was one of his intimates. She who was one of the disciples. And you would think this would be all over the New York Times front page, wouldn't it? I mean, you would think this is like a really big piece of news. I don't think anybody hardly even knows about it. And what did she do? She's sitting in this group of men at this moment in time, and she does something that this gentleman did. The line starts with this. It's a small passage, and it says, in this moment in time, when there was confusion and chaos and fear and terror and darkness, which happens in our life, forget him, forget this gentleman, and forget The story. Think of your life in a moment in time, a turning point where the lights went out and there is chaos because now you're all alone. She arose. That's how the stanza starts. She arose. She arose. Not she stands up, or she took a stand, or she shuffled herself up to a standing position. She arose. She arose. She rose up in consciousness from out of the chaos and nervousness and confusion and fear and terror and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Imagine how they must have felt at that moment. Imagine how we feel when we get the news that we've just woken up from a coma. Imagine the news when something so awful happens that we turn away from the God of our understanding and we are done. We've been betrayed, man. We've been betrayed. She arose in consciousness. She lifted herself up higher than the emotions that were flying around her. And she said this. She said, do not remain in sorrow and doubt. She didn't say don't be sorrowful, don't cry. She said don't remain there. Look at this. We're going to have our sorrow. We're going to have our doubt. We're going to be upset. We're going to be angry. We're going to need to hit things. We're going to need to say some very choice 4-letter words. All those things have to happen because we're human. We have to go through the human emotions. Here's the key. She rose up in consciousness and she said above that, just don't remain there. Don't make a way of life out of it. Yeah, this is so crazy what happened, but don't hang out in the place of reacting to it and live there. Rumi would say, don't pitch a tent there. Don't make it your home. Don't make it the next 10 years of your life. Don't make it who you become. Don't remain in sorrow and doubt, she said, because His grace will guide and comfort you. What is she saying? She's saying this. What did the gentleman say in his letter? He said this. He said, they told me that I will not be able to carry on any type of understandable conversation with anyone, basically be left to sit around and be disabled. Well, he said, with the help of the talks that I heard, with the help of the truth that I heard in the sermons, I decided to get off my butt and do something about my situation. I felt that you told me from 1,500 miles away that God had not brought me this far to have Him drop me on my butt. He loved me way too much, and I needed to be quiet and listen to His will. And so I did just that. Do not remain in sorrow and doubt. She rose up and she saw from a larger perspective something that the Tao Te Ching tells us that we need to do that's going to be invaluable for you to do. And what does it say? It says, hold fast to the power of one. Hold fast to the great form and watch the world change as it may. Hold fast to that which is changeless. We're holding on to Jesus the man. We're holding on to our health as we know. We're holding on to being a pilot. We're holding on to the person we love, to the marriage, to the job, to the thing. Hold instead on to something that is changeless. Hold on to something that no matter what is eternal and will never change. That way, the world's going to change. But when it does, it's not going to shut you down and crush you. He rose up. He said it himself, I got off my butt. He rose up and realized it was impossible for life that was always growing him to suddenly drop him and say, good luck, you're on your own. He realized that all by himself. He didn't remain in the sorrow and doubt. He started there. We all do. Of course we do. He just didn't remain there. And she's turning, she's saying to them, turn back. What is she doing? She's turning them back to their source. She's turning them back to God. She's turning them back to the light. She's turning them back to the universe. She's turning them back to the one thing, grace, that's going to enable them to walk through this situation and be greater men than they ever imagined they could possibly ever be. She was turning the light back on the dark road they started traveling. We have to do the one thing we don't want to do. It's the craziest thing. We have to do the one thing we don't want to do. And what is the one thing we don't want to do? We don't want this light anymore because we don't believe it. We don't want this God anymore because we don't believe it. Not if this could happen. We shut down and divide. And what does the word doubt mean? The word doubt comes from the word divide. We divide ourselves, our heart from our body. That's it. And we shut the heart down and say, sorry, I'm not opening up this thing again. That ain't happening. We divide ourselves from our source, and we are on our own. And the problem is not what happened to us. The problem is that we've cut ourselves off from the source. And without the source, we got no light. And without the light, we are lost. We think we're lost because of what happened. We're not lost because of what happened. We're lost because we turned the light off. We divided ourselves from the source of life, it says, and said, I'm sorry, I'm going to hang out here because I cannot trust you again. And this road without the light gets so dark we can't see what our next step needs to be, and we are as lost as we've ever been. That is the issue she was saying needed to be addressed. What did he say? He said he got off his butt, decided to be quiet, and listen to God's will. So he listened to the talks, long distance. He put the CDs in and he listened to the talks over and over again, the truth over and over again. And he said, it's going to be 3 years post-coma this December. And because of the positive messages, I'm now serving on the Minnesota Statewide Independent Living Council. It's a governor-appointed position that they gave me. This council advises all state agencies in regards to keeping persons with disabilities living independently as possible in the community, as well as I'm a member of their executive committee. And I am also a member of the board of directors for the Brain Injury Association of Minnesota. And I'm also an active member of the Speakers Bureau for the Brain Injury Association of Minnesota, a group that goes out to different organizations to discuss and increase awareness about brain injury, the challenges of it, and how prevention is the only cure. Instead, Mary says, instead, what do we do if we don't remain in sorrow and doubt? He, a man who was not supposed to be able to even communicate again, is like on every agency and in a speaker's bureau. Hell, I'm not even in a speaker's bureau. He's on a speaker's bureau going all around Minnesota talking about this turning point in his life. She says, here's what you need to do instead. It's one thing to say, hey, don't get all hung up about this. Don't be all sorrowful and doubtful. Get over it. That's not what she's saying. She's saying, instead, do this. This is the advice. Instead, do this. Let us praise His greatness, for He has prepared us for this. He is calling us to be fully human. Look what she's saying. It's counterintuitive and it is downright ridiculous. Let us praise. Let us praise. Are we supposed to be praising? Let us praise His greatness, for He has prepared us for this. What we know on this path is the greatness of God is the greatness of you. That if you want to know where God lives, look inside of yourself. That if you're looking for the universe and the source of the universe, look in and around yourself, because it's right here. She's not saying praise some great God in the sky for having manipulated your life and this situation. She's saying turn to the greatness. What does the Tao say? Hold to the great form. Hold to the great form. Hold to the great form, it says, and let the world pass as it may, and then the changes of life will not bring pain, but contentment and joy and well-being. You see, a fish that ventures from deep waters is soon snagged by a net. If we leave the depth of us, if we stop this connection, and praise doesn't mean, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, I'm so happy I was in a coma. It's not that, and you know it's not that. It is the part of us that turns toward the greatness within ourselves, the greatness in life, the great intelligence, the great form, and holds on to the wisdom of life itself. Because you know when that caterpillar is told that it's going to be a butterfly, you know it thinks you're on crack. It is not possible that this furry thing with 10,000 feet is going to be some beautiful thing in the sky after it goes in this crazy little cocoon and then bursts out of it and becomes something other than what it was. And when somebody tells us that the truth about us is somewhere inside of us and there is a greatness inside of us and we are far greater than we ever imagined possible, we look at them the same cross-eyed way and say, you know, what are you talking about? This is me. What she's saying is turn back to the greatness that is at work in your life, moving you from the greatness that you are into expressing the greatness that you are yet to be. An acorn is a hard, we have like thousands of them on our property. It's a hard little shell. If it doesn't crack open, nothing happens. We can't live in that state. Turning points are the moment where the hard shell of our heart is cracked open. Not because life's a bitch, but because until we crack open this acorn that doesn't do anybody any good at all, can't lay down some roots and begin to do what it came here to be, which is to be an oak tree. It can't. The acorn is already, but not yet, an oak tree. We are already living in our greatness, but not yet. We're already where we want to be, but not yet. We're already who we came to be, but not yet. It's in us. And life is the process that takes us from being that little thing into something that is so tall and so majestic and so magnificent that birds come and live in it and squirrels get their food from it and people get enjoyment from it. And oak tree serves just an abundance of needs. And it's beautiful and it's amazing and it makes you feel good and it's outrageous. And so are we. And what is Mary saying? Don't get stuck here. And by all means, don't divide yourself from the source that put you here. Because the source put you here because you're already, but not yet. Let this process take you from already to beyond not yet, so that it can continue to move you into the greatness that you are. This guy had a prognosis of like 0, of nothing. That was his prognosis. You're going to do nothing. You're going to be nothing. Your life is over. That'll be $650 for the consult. Right? That was his prognosis. So this is what he's doing. I have my own apartment with some outside support for 1.5 years now. And your sermons made all this possible, along with God's support. What is he saying? And I so understand, and please hear me. He is not saying you gave me this any more than Jesus gave the disciples anything, any more than any guru or any teacher or any facilitator gives you anything. You're hearing a truth that, hello, you already know. You're just being reminded of what you already know. He needed to be reminded of it. He was prepared for this. Look what she says. Instead, let us praise his greatness. Hear it. Your own. Capital G, greatness. Let us praise the greatness of the intelligence of this life force that moves us like it moves the rose from being invisible inside of a branch to showing itself, to opening its petals, to finally, you think the work is done, releasing a fragrance that is mind-boggling. And I'm not talking about the roses from the Korean market either. I'm talking from real ones in real nature, not virtual nature, right? The smell is amazing. We have a fragrance. We do too. We're meant to open. We are too. And when we open, the fragrance that we emit dizzies people around us because they've been waiting for it. That's why we're here. What does she say? She says, praise His greatness. Why? Because you've been prepared for this. This didn't happen to him when he didn't have any tools. This happened to him after he walked away with a box of tools that enabled him to know exactly what he needed to do at a moment like this in his life when he was at a turning point and he could have turned off the light and said, pour me forever, like a mantra, as could the disciples. She said, understand that you've been prepared for this. How do you know? Because this has happened. Nothing happens in our life unless we are prepared to hold it. However, we cannot hold it alone. And by all means, don't try to hold it alone. Turn back to the source of light. Turn back to the source of life. Turn back to the source that will carry you, that will hold you, that will guide you, just like it does everything in nature. Turn back to that. Connect to that. And what is she saying? Here is why we are being called. She said He is calling us to be fully human. Not just human. It's a funny word. She didn't say He's calling us to be human. We're human. We're doing our thing. We're wearing our jeans. You know, we're shaving our legs. We're doing what humans do every day. She said fully human. And fully human means the place where the divinity that we are and the humanity where we are meet. The meeting place between the acorn and the oak tree. The meeting place between the human and the divine. The meeting place between our mind and our heart. The meeting place between the part of us that says, God, I wonder what I'm supposed to do with my life. And the part of us that says, for Christ's sake, you don't remember? The meeting place between where we are and the greatness we are yet to become. We are being called to step into that greatness. We're not being stopped and crushed and held back. We are being broken open so that the universe can pour itself into us. That's what's happening. Both of these people, Mary and this gentleman, Rick, stayed connected to the source and were able to remind thousands in one case and hundreds of millions in another case, that whatever you do during the turning point, when you are about to turn the light out, don't remain there. Turn back to the source. If you can't praise it, at least recognize it, witness to it, be aware of it, this intelligence that is bringing you from acorn to oak tree, and understand that this situation couldn't be happening unless you were prepared to receive it and hold it and grow from it. And understand that you are being called. For those of us who say, well, you know, I don't hear anything and I'm not called and I don't hear my calling and I wish I knew what my calling was. You're called. It's a call. Being crushed is a call. And it's a call saying, stop everything. Connect to me and let me take you on a journey where? Into your greatness, into the greatness that dwells within you that you've forgotten about. Come with me, it says, so that you may become what you were born and destined to become. Enough said. Thank you for coming.